Ladies and gentlemen, today we are gathered here not just to discuss a subject, but to confront a truth that we have been conditioned to overlook. It's a truth wrapped in a virtue that we hold in high esteem, yet one that has the potential to destroy our lives if misunderstood and misapplied. That truth is kindness. Kindness is often seen as a moral pinnacle, something we must strive toward. But what if I told you that the very thing we believe will elevate us could, in fact, pull us down? That's what we're here to explore today. 8 ways kindness can ruin your life. But let me be clear, I'm not advocating for cruelty or bitterness. I'm not promoting selfishness or indifference. What I am urging you to recognize is that there's a dark side to kindness, a side that can be destructive if we don't fully understand its power and its limitations. So let's journey together into this paradox and uncover the truth about kindness. One of the most painful realities of kindness is that when applied without wisdom, it can easily transform you into a doormat. At first glance, being kind seems like the ideal way to live. After all, kindness is a virtue. However, if kindness is not paired with clear boundaries, it opens the door to manipulation and exploitation. Consider this. You have a friend who constantly calls you late at night with problems. Every time they reach out, you rush to help, offer advice, lend your ear. You feel good about it, right? You believe that you're being a good friend. But over time, something starts to happen. You notice that you're always the one reaching out, always the one offering help, always the one who sacrifices their time. Your needs are dismissed, your concerns ignored, and yet you keep showing up because you've been conditioned to believe that kindness means putting others first, no matter what. The trap is this: the more you give, the more people begin to expect it. At first, you might feel fulfilled, even noble, but soon it becomes a cycle that wears you down. You are no longer valued for who you are. You're valued only for what you can give. This is not love, and this is not true friendship. You've allowed yourself to become invisible, to become someone whose worth is determined by the ability to meet the endless demands of others. In relationships, whether personal or professional, kindness should never come at the expense of your own identity or well-being. The lack of boundaries in kindness invites the possibility of being taken for granted. You may feel like you're constantly trying to prove your worth through your generosity, but in the process, you lose sight of your own value. The cost of being endlessly accommodating is your peace, your time, your energy, and sometimes even your dreams. Think about the many people who, despite their overwhelming kindness, end up feeling drained, resentful, and disconnected from themselves. They've been giving so much that they forget to check in with their own needs. Over time, this can lead to burnout, frustration, and deep dissatisfaction. Your kindness is not limitless. It is a resource that requires replenishment. If you do not create space for your own needs, you'll find yourself struggling to meet everyone else's until one day you have nothing left to give. What if instead you began to see kindness as a tool for both giving and preserving yourself? What if kindness meant respecting your own time and energy, setting healthy limits, and being okay with saying no when necessary? You are worthy of your own compassion just as much as anyone else. True kindness does not demand that you become a martyr. It recognizes your worth and seeks balance. Your kindness should enhance your relationships, not diminish your ability to live fully and authentically. When kindness is overextended, it often leads to dependency on your time, your resources, and your emotional support. In these situations, you may feel like you're doing the right thing, helping someone who is struggling or in need. But in reality, your kindness can keep them stuck in a state of perpetual reliance on you instead of empowering them to stand on their own. Picture a parent who, out of love and kindness, gives their child everything they need, from material possessions to emotional support. At first, it seems harmless. After all, they are providing for their child's growth. But over time, they begin to notice something troubling. The child who was once independent starts to demand more and more, not just things, but their time, their emotional energy, their guidance. The parent, eager to help, continues to give again and again. The child, however, doesn't grow. They rely more and more on the parent, unable or unwilling to take responsibility for their own life. This dependency doesn't just occur in families. It happens in friendships, romantic relationships, and even in the workplace. Perhaps you've had a colleague who constantly turns to you for assistance, no matter the task, no matter how small or trivial. At first, you don't mind helping. You feel valued, like you're making a difference. But slowly, this dynamic shifts. The colleague starts to expect your help as a given, and their reliance on you deepens. They stop thinking critically, relying instead on your input. They stop problem solving for themselves. And in essence, they stop growing. Second person breeds stagnation. When you constantly give, you might feel that you're being a good person. But the reality is, you're creating an environment where the other person never learns to stand on their own 2 feet. This is not kindness, it's enabling. It's like giving someone a fish every day instead of teaching them how to fish for themselves. Your kindness may temporarily ease their struggle, but it also traps them in a cycle of helplessness. Consider the example of someone who's in a toxic relationship, constantly giving their partner second chances, rescuing them from the consequences of their actions. At first, they may believe they are showing kindness, but what they're actually doing is allowing the other person to avoid responsibility. The more they intervene, the less the other person learns to change their behavior. The kindness, while well-intended, prevents growth and perpetuates the dysfunction. True kindness is not about offering endless support to make others feel better in the moment. It's about empowering them, equipping them with the tools and knowledge they need to become strong, independent, and capable. It's about recognizing that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back, give someone space to grow, and allow them to take ownership of their own journey. Kindness should always seek the best for others, and sometimes what's best is not giving more, but allowing them to face their challenges head on. When you do this, you're giving them the opportunity to rise above their circumstances, to strengthen their character, and to cultivate their own resilience. The real power of kindness lies not in keeping people dependent on you, but in helping them become the best versions of themselves. When kindness is misapplied, it can easily pave the way for unhealthy relationships. This is one of the most insidious consequences of excessive kindness. People start to take advantage of you, your time, your resources, and your emotional energy. You want to help, to be there for others, but in doing so, you risk falling into relationships that drain you rather than lift you up. Take a moment and think about the relationships in your life. Have you ever found yourself giving more than you are receiving? You give your time, your advice, your resources, and yet, no matter how much you give, the other person seems to demand more. Maybe it's a friend who constantly leans on you for emotional support but never offers a listening ear when you need it. Perhaps it's a family member who asks for financial help time and again, but when the roles are reversed, they're nowhere to be found. The reality is that kindness without balance and reciprocity breeds resentment. The more you give, the more others expect, and the more you lose yourself in the process. There's a quiet cost to these relationships. At first, you feel good about helping. After all, isn't that what kindness is about? But over time, you start to feel unappreciated, ignored, and even invisible. Your needs are pushed aside, your emotions overlooked, and you begin to feel like you're simply existing for others, not living for yourself. You end up in a cycle of one-sided sacrifice where you give everything and in return receive very little, emotionally or practically. Here's the painful truth. You can't pour from an empty cup. When you're constantly giving and never receiving, you begin to lose the energy, the joy, and the passion that make you who you are. And yet, because kindness is so ingrained in our values, we often don't recognize the toll it's taking until we're completely drained. This depletion leaves you vulnerable to further manipulation, to people who come into your life and take without giving. Imagine a partner who takes all your love, all your time, and all your attention, but never returns the same level of care. You continue to invest in the relationship because you believe kindness should be unconditional. But this mindset only encourages an unhealthy dynamic, one where the other person may feel entitled to your love without ever reciprocating it. It's a relationship built on imbalanced expectations, where one person is always on, always giving, always sacrificing, and the other is off, never contributing in equal measure. This creates emotional exhaustion, stress, and frustration. The more you give, the more you find yourself depleting your mental and emotional reserves. It becomes clear kindness is not the solution. The solution is healthy boundaries, mutual respect, and reciprocity. True kindness is not about giving endlessly with no expectation of return. It's about creating relationships that are nurturing and balanced. When kindness is genuine, it builds strong, supportive relationships where both parties invest in each other. It fosters an environment of trust where both people are willing to give and receive in equal measure. Without this balance, kindness becomes a tool for manipulation and control, and relationships begin to feel more like burdens than blessings. Another painful consequence of kindness is that it can often be mistaken for weakness. When you choose kindness, especially in situations that require strength, people may interpret your compassion as vulnerability. They may see your willingness to give, to empathize, to listen as a sign that they can walk all over you, take advantage of you, or manipulate the situation to their benefit. Think about the many times you've been kind in situations where others might expect you to stand firm or be more assertive. Perhaps you've been in a meeting where someone was rude, where their behavior was out of line. Instead of confronting the issue, you stayed calm, you smiled, you remained polite. The result? Others may have taken that as a sign of submission, that you were weak, that you couldn't stand up for yourself. And the more this happens, the more people will begin to take your kindness for granted. It's easy for others to mistake kindness for passivity. In fact, many people will use your kind nature to push their own agenda. They will try to manipulate situations, expecting you to give in simply because you are a nice person. They may guilt trip you into saying yes when you need to say no, because kindness is often perceived as a lack of conviction, as if your kindness is there to be exploited. This is especially true in the workplace. Imagine a scenario where you are the team player, the one always stepping in to help, to take on extra work, to keep the peace. You want to be kind, you want to contribute, but as time goes on, your kindness is no longer seen as an asset. It's seen as a weakness. People take advantage of you, dumping their responsibilities on your plate because they know you'll never say no. Over time, your contributions go unnoticed. Your boundaries are ignored, and you are left with a feeling of frustration and powerlessness. In personal relationships, this dynamic is just as dangerous. You may find yourself in a relationship where your kindness is seen as a sign of submission. Perhaps your partner knows you will always forgive, always offer understanding, always put their needs first. They take this for granted, thinking that your kindness means you won't stand up for yourself or demand respect. But eventually, this kind of dynamic eats away at your self-esteem and your dignity. When your kindness is mistaken for weakness, you lose not only respect from others, but also respect for yourself. The truth is that kindness does not equate to weakness. In fact, true kindness is rooted in strength and courage. It takes immense strength to show compassion in the face of adversity, to offer help to those who may not deserve it, and to be kind when it's easier to be cold. But that same strength must be tempered with wisdom. You must understand that kindness is not about being passive or submissive. It's about offering grace while maintaining your integrity and self-respect. True strength lies in knowing when to show kindness and when to stand firm, when to offer a listening ear and when to set a boundary. It's about having the courage to assert your needs, even when that means disappointing someone else. Kindness is not about being a pushover, and it certainly isn't about being silent when your voice matters. It is about having the strength to speak up for what's right, to demand respect, and to remain compassionate while standing in your power. When you consistently extend kindness without limits, it can quickly set up unrealistic expectations. This is especially true when people get accustomed to the idea that you are always available to help, always willing to give, always there to listen. What starts as a simple act of goodwill can spiral into a pattern where others begin to expect more than you can reasonably provide. Imagine a scenario where you're always the person people turn to in times of crisis. Whether it's a friend facing a personal struggle, a colleague needing extra support at work, or a family member going through a tough time, you're the one who steps in. You give your time, your energy, and your emotional support, sometimes to the point of exhaustion. At first, it feels good. You feel needed, appreciated, and you genuinely want to help. But then over time, you realize that the calls don't stop. The requests don't end. It's as if your kindness has created a never-ending demand for more of you, your time, your resources, your emotional energy. And yet, the more you give, the less they seem to appreciate it. The issue here is that people begin to take your kindness for granted. When kindness becomes predictable, it becomes expected. And once something is expected, it loses its value. The people around you may no longer see your generosity as a gift, but as an obligation. You no longer feel like you're giving from a place of love or compassion. Instead, you're giving out of duty. And that is a heavy burden to carry. Real life examples are everywhere. A woman might continually give her time to care for her children, sacrificing her own desires, her own needs in the process. But one day, she finds herself overwhelmed, depleted, and resentful. Her children have grown accustomed to her putting them first at all times. And when she finally expresses a need for help, the response is a cold silence or even frustration. The very kindness she offered has now turned into an expectation, an unspoken entitlement. The same can happen in friendships and work relationships. Perhaps you are the friend who always plans get-togethers, always checks in on others, always provides emotional support. Initially, this role feels rewarding, but eventually you begin to feel that no one is checking in on you. The emotional load becomes too heavy, yet others seem oblivious to your exhaustion. They expect you to always be the one holding things together while no one ever holds you up. This is not just a small inconvenience. This is a dangerous pattern. People can begin to take advantage of your kindness because it becomes a routine. Your good nature, your willingness to always be there for others becomes the baseline. And when you can no longer meet those expectations, the disappointment is palpable. You are no longer seen as a person with limits, but as a resource that can be tapped into at any moment. This is why it's vital to protect your boundaries and manage the expectations of others. The people in your life need to understand that your kindness is not an infinite well. Your time and energy are valuable, and there's only so much of you to go around. You must be willing to say no when needed and communicate your limits in a healthy way. If kindness is to remain a blessing, it must be given consciously, thoughtfully, and with an awareness of its impact on both you and those around you. Another potentially devastating consequence of kindness is burnout. While kindness is meant to be an uplifting, positive force, When overextended, it can lead to physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion. This is particularly dangerous because burnout can slowly sneak up on you, masking itself as something noble or selfless, when in reality it's a silent killer of your well-being. Think about the people in your life who constantly give. Perhaps it's a teacher who spends hours outside of class tutoring students, a manager who works late to help their team, or a friend who always checks in on others, putting their own needs aside. These are all acts of kindness, but they are also acts of self-sacrifice. At first, it doesn't feel like a sacrifice. You enjoy helping, you feel good about making a difference, and you get a sense of purpose from being there for others. But the constant giving, whether it's emotional labor, time, or resources, takes a toll. It chips away at you bit by bit until one day you realize that you are completely drained. Burnout doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow process that happens when we give without replenishing ourselves. It starts small, a skipped lunch, an ignored need for rest, pushing through exhaustion to meet someone else's demands. But over time, it adds up. You start feeling physically fatigued, mentally foggy, emotionally distant. The things that once brought you joy now feel like chores. Your patience wears thin, your empathy fades, and your ability to connect with others begins to diminish. There's a well-known term for this in the healthcare industry, especially among caregivers: compassion fatigue. It's the emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion that comes from caring for others without taking care of yourself. Healthcare professionals, social workers, and first responders often experience this because their job requires them to give to others continuously, often without enough time to rest or reflect. But this is not limited to those professions. Anytime we give without self-care, we risk burning out. This is where the problem lies with kindness. It can become so consuming that we neglect ourselves in the process. We start to feel guilty for taking time off or saying no, even though those are the very things we need to preserve our well-being. Kindness becomes a source of stress rather than joy. It becomes a weight, not a gift. We begin to lose touch with our own needs as we're so focused on meeting the needs of others. Real-world examples are heartbreaking. Think of the mother who gives everything to her children: cooking, cleaning, working multiple jobs, managing the household, always putting everyone else's needs first. Eventually, she becomes overwhelmed, irritable, and emotionally detached. The love she once poured into her family is now tainted by exhaustion. Or think of a colleague who constantly stays late to finish projects, offers to help everyone else with their workload, and never takes a moment for themselves. Over time, they begin to feel resentful of their colleagues' dependency, even though they've done everything with the intention of being kind. Burnout is the inevitable result of unchecked kindness. It is the consequence of never allowing yourself the grace to rest, recharge, and nurture your own needs. It's the silent, slow erosion of your vitality until one day you realize you've given so much that there's nothing left for yourself. This is why kindness must always be balanced with self-care. You cannot pour from an empty cup. If you continue to give without replenishing your own strength, you will burn out. And when you burn out, you no longer have the capacity to be kind, not to others and not to yourself. When kindness is given without discernment or boundaries, it can open the door to manipulation. The truth is that not everyone you encounter will appreciate your generosity in the way you expect. Some may see your kindness as an opportunity to exploit you, to take advantage of your willingness to help, and to use your good nature for their own benefit. This form of manipulation is subtle but powerful, and it can leave you feeling used, betrayed, and ultimately disillusioned with the very thing you once believed was a pure and virtuous act. Consider the scenario where you offer to help someone in need, believing you are being compassionate and selfless. You might lend them money, give them your time, or offer them emotional support. You do it because it feels right and because you want to make a difference in their life. But then something begins to happen. They start coming back to you again and again, asking for more help, more of your resources, more of your energy, without ever giving anything in return. What started as an act of kindness now feels like a never-ending cycle of demand. You begin to realize that they are not seeking help, they are seeking dependence. They have learned to manipulate your generosity, taking advantage of your good heart for their own purposes. This type of manipulation is particularly damaging because it creates a sense of guilt. When you refuse to help, you may be made to feel selfish or uncaring, as though your boundaries are an indication of your lack of compassion. In these moments, your kindness is twisted, used against you to create emotional pressure that forces you to give more than you are able or willing to. They exploit your desire to do good, your natural inclination to help others, until you are left depleted, exhausted, and resentful. A common form of this manipulation is emotional blackmail. Might have experienced someone who constantly plays the victim, expecting you to rescue them from every difficult situation. They may act as though their problems are your responsibility, and every time you offer your help, they promise to change, to make things better. But nothing ever changes. The cycle repeats itself, and you are left wondering if they truly care about you, or if they simply view you as a tool to alleviate their own burdens. When kindness is used as a weapon, it erodes trust and creates a toxic dynamic where your good intentions become the means for someone else to gain control over you. This can happen in relationships, friendships, or even work environments where your willingness to help is continuously taken advantage of. The more you give, the more they take, and the more they demand, until you are left questioning whether you can trust your own instincts. This is why kindness must come with wisdom. It's essential to recognize when someone is truly in need and when they are simply using you to avoid taking responsibility for their own life. You have the right to say no, to protect yourself from being manipulated, and to stop giving when it no longer serves you or the other person in a healthy way. Kindness should empower both parties in a relationship, not just one. You have to be discerning about when and how you give so that your kindness does not become a tool for manipulation. One of the most damaging effects of excessive kindness is that it often leads to self-neglect. When you are constantly focused on the needs of others, you can easily lose sight of your own well-being. This is particularly dangerous because it's not always immediately obvious. You may feel virtuous, noble even, for always being there for others. But in the process, you might be sacrificing your own health, happiness, and inner peace. Think about the people who always seem to put everyone else first. Whether it's a parent who gives up their own time and dreams to support their children, a friend who always puts others' needs above their own, or an employee who spends countless hours working overtime to ensure the success of others. Their kindness is admirable, but it often comes at a significant personal cost. As they pour their energy into caring for others, they are left with little to no time to care for themselves. Their own needs, emotional, physical, and mental, are neglected in favor of fulfilling the expectations and demands of others. This pattern of self-neglect is incredibly insidious because it often begins with good intentions. You may genuinely want to help others, to be there for them, to offer support. However, the more you give without replenishing yourself, the more you begin to lose a sense of who you are and what you need. You become so entangled in the lives of others that you forget to nurture your own dreams, your own desires, and your own personal growth. This is a common struggle for caregivers and those in service-oriented roles. Healthcare workers, for example, often experience burnout and emotional exhaustion because they devote so much of their time and energy to caring for others, neglecting their own self-care in the process. Over time, this self-neglect can lead to feelings of resentment, dissatisfaction, and even depression, as they realize they have given so much of themselves that there is nothing left. On a personal level, you might experience this when you give up your hobbies, your social life, or your personal goals to make time for others. You say yes to every request, take on every responsibility, and put your own needs on the back burner, thinking that you'll take care of yourself later, but later never comes. Instead, you find yourself constantly drained, feeling disconnected from the person you once were. Your sense of self is eroded by the constant demands of others, and the kindness you once offered so freely becomes a source of bitterness and exhaustion. This is why kindness must always include a healthy dose of self-compassion. You cannot help others if you do not help yourself first. You are not a machine. You are a human being with limits, needs, and desires. Self-care is not selfish, it's essential. Kindness to others should never come at the expense of kindness to yourself. You must learn to say no when necessary, to set boundaries that protect your time and energy, and to recognize when it's time to focus on your own well-being. When you practice self-care alongside kindness, you empower yourself to give from a place of strength and balance. You preserve your energy, your passions, and your sense of identity so that you can continue to show up for others without losing yourself in the process. Remember, your kindness should be a source of joy, not a sacrifice of your personal health and happiness. In the end, kindness is one of the most powerful forces we possess. It has the ability to heal, to uplift, to transform lives. However, if we are not careful, it can also become the very thing that drains us, exploits us, and blinds us to our own needs. It is easy to fall into the trap of overextending ourselves, of believing that we must always give more, be more, without ever taking the time to pause, to reflect, and to protect our own well-being. True kindness is not about self-sacrifice to the point of depletion, nor is it about enabling unhealthy behaviors in others. It is about balance, about giving generously but with wisdom and discernment. It is about knowing when to say yes and when to say no, about setting boundaries that protect not only our time and energy, but also our sense of self-worth and dignity. Kindness should never make us a doormat or a tool for manipulation. It should never come at the cost of our mental, emotional, or physical health. We must remember that to be truly kind to others, we must first be kind to ourselves. We cannot pour into others from an empty cup, and we must never allow ourselves to be reduced to nothing in the service of others. The best gift we can give the world is a balanced, healthy, and whole version of ourselves. When we take care of ourselves, when we honor our own needs, set boundaries, and practice self-respect, we are not only able to give more to others, but we also create space for meaningful, fulfilling relationships and experiences. So as you move forward, remember this: kindness is a strength, but it must be tempered with wisdom. It is a gift, but it should never come at the cost of your own peace. Embrace kindness, but never forget to take care of the person who needs your love the most.